25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports into the U.S.
Turning now to President Trump's trade war as U.S. and Chinese officials meet in Switzerland this weekend.
American farmers are now facing a nightmare. Fields full of crops with no buyers in sight. Silos are bursting, dairy shipments are rotting on docks, and China, once a key trade partner, has walked away. In just 6 weeks, U.S. farm exports to China plummeted by 28%. For sorghum growers, the situation is even more dire, with staggering 94.4% freefall, a collapse, not just a dip. While Washington remains silent, farmers are left with an impossible choice: harvest a loss or watch their livelihoods disintegrate. This isn't merely a bad season. It's the unraveling of an entire industry. The collapse has been swift, brutal, and impossible to ignore. Sorghum, once a thriving trade, has been devastated. Shipments dropped from 1.44 million metric tons in early 2023 to just 78,000 tons in 2024. The cause? China's retaliatory tariffs now exceed 125%, rendering American grain commercially irrelevant in its largest market. And sorghum is just the beginning. At the port of Oakland, almond and dairy exports have fallen by 40%, leaving trucks idle and containers stranded. Worse still, China has moved on, securing long-term deals with Brazil and Argentina, relationships that took years to build and won't be undone easily. The crisis has spread. Hay exporters in Washington are laying off workers. Soybean futures have dropped 14%, and China's imports from Brazil have surged 25%. This isn't a temporary slump. It's a permanent shift in global trade. Washington's response has been largely symbolic, offering promises of relief while ignoring the root issue: market access. Before the tariffs, China bought over 90% of U.S. sorghum exports. That lifeline is now severed. No bailout can restore it. Each canceled shipment and idle port deepens America's loss, while Brazil and others cement their gains. This isn't a problem that tariffs can solve with a flip of a switch. Farmers can't survive on patriotism alone, and the crisis is now radiating outward, crippling the very ports that serve as the backbone of U.S. agricultural trade, like the Port of Oakland. The nation's top gateway for refrigerated farm exports is crumbling under the weight of China's retaliatory tariffs. Cargo volumes have plunged, and the fallout goes far beyond idle ships. It's about livelihoods vanishing overnight. Dock workers, truckers, and warehouse staff are all feeling the sting as agricultural exports dry up. The port's unique 50-50 balance between imports and exports makes it especially vulnerable. And with China accounting for 29% of its total trade, the damage is spreading fast. Containers meant to be filled with almonds, dairy, and beef now sit empty. Contracts are being canceled mid-transit, forcing exporters to scramble to reroute shipments, if that's even possible. One hay supplier in Washington laid off 25% of its workforce in just 2 weeks after orders collapsed. Another exporter watched helplessly as 6,400 metric tons of wood pulp sat in warehouse limbo, incurring mounting demurrage fees while waiting for new buyers. A separate shipment of 90 metric tons already en route to China now faces outright abandonment. The economics are brutal. With freight costs soaring and no buyers willing to pay inflated prices, shipping at a loss becomes the only option, until even that isn't viable. The real crisis isn't just about lost sales. It's the slow unraveling of supply chain decades in the making. Since the latest round of tariffs, 68 scheduled sailings have been canceled, a trend known in the industry as blank sailings. Each one means more than a missed delivery. It means trucks without loads, cranes without work, and workers without paychecks. Poor executives warn this slowdown is not a temporary hiccup, but a structural shift. We can't absorb these costs forever, one exporter admitted. At some point, the shipments just stop. The pain isn't confined to Oakland. Agricultural exporters across the country are facing the same nightmare: rising fees, collapsing demand, and no clear path forward. The U.S. government's new $1.5 million fee per Chinese vessel, aimed at pressuring Beijing, is backfiring. While bulk shipments are exempt, high-value containerized goods like beef, poultry, and dairy, which make up 55% of U.S. farm export earnings, have been hit hard. The ripple effect is undeniable. When a hay supplier lays off workers, it doesn't just hurt those employees. It impacts the trucking firms that haul their goods, the equipment dealers who supply their machinery, and the small towns whose economies depend on them. Thousands of families across rural America depend on farm paychecks, and the longer this trade war drags on, the more permanent the damage becomes. Ports can't pivot overnight. Buyers won't wait forever, and with each passing week, the U.S. loses more of its foothold in global agriculture. The question is no longer whether the trade war is hurting farmers. It's how much of the industry will be left standing when it's over. The White House has floated another round of farm bailouts. Just like last time, a Band-Aid solution for a crisis that needs surgery. But across the heartland, there's no celebration. Farmers have seen this playbook before. Bailouts might keep the lights on for another season, but they won't reopen closed markets, restore broken contracts, or rebuild the trust lost with overseas buyers. In Iowa, corn farmers are planting fields knowing they'll lose money. In Kentucky, some are questioning whether to harvest at all. This isn't farming for profit anymore. It's triage. The government's response has been more cash injections and short-term fixes. But what farmers truly need isn't another check. It's stable markets. Without buyers, trade routes, and predictable demand, even the largest bailout is just postponing the inevitable. Frustration has reached a breaking point. For the first time in years, major farm groups, like the National Farmers Union and the American Soybean Association, are uniting in opposition to Washington's trade war tactics. They are now backing legislation to limit the White House's unchecked power over tariffs and demanding congressional oversight on trade decisions. Their message is clear. The current approach isn't just failing. It's making things worse. The numbers back it up. Retaliatory tariffs from China, Canada, and the EU haven't just reduced exports. They've flooded the U.S. market with unsold goods, crashing prices. When China abruptly canceled a 12,000-ton pork order, its largest since 2020, it wasn't just a lost sale. It was perishable rotting in storage nowhere. Meanwhile, corporate food processors and distributors are posting record profits, while the farmers producing the crops are trapped between rising costs and collapsing income. The cruel irony couldn't be clearer. Tariffs were intended to protect American farmers, but instead, they've handed more power to middlemen while pushing small and mid-sized farms toward insolvency. Meanwhile, agribusiness giants are adapting, shifting their supply chains elsewhere. The system is rigged and the evidence is in the prices. Consumer food costs have surged nearly 18% year over year, yet farm incomes continue to decline. Washington's policies aren't shielding agriculture. They're accelerating its consolidation into fewer, more powerful hands. There's a deeper betrayal at play. For decades, U.S. farm policy promoted overproduction while relying on global markets to absorb the excess. Now, with those markets slipping away, the entire model is unraveling. Over 40% of America's soy, corn, and wheat growers say they can't break even without export contracts. Bailouts won't fix that, nor will hollow promises of winning a trade war. The true cost of this conflict won't just be measured in quarterly losses or this year's failed harvest. It'll be counted in the years, even decades, it will take to rebuild what is being destroyed right now: trust. Global buyers don't just want crops, they want reliability. Every canceled contract, every abandoned shipment, sends a loud message. America's agricultural supply chain is no longer dependable. China's pivot to Brazil says it all. That move didn't happen overnight. It took 3 years of strategic investment in Brazilian ports, government-backed financing, and deliberate trade realignments to replace U.S. soybeans. Those deals are now locked in, and reversing them means going up against a system built specifically to exclude the U.S. from a weakened position. Global markets don't pause while a country sorts out its trade policy. Once buyers leave, they rarely return. The damage is already rippling through rural America. Banks and agriculture-heavy counties are sounding alarms. Rising loan defaults, tighter credit lines, and nervous lenders are early signs of a deepening credit crunch. Farmers who spent years cultivating relationships with overseas buyers now watch as those same buyers sign decade-long contracts with South American competitors. You can't bail out trust, one grain exporter said after his third canceled deal this season. He's right. Money might keep farms afloat for now, but it can't rebuild the global networks that took generations to form. And the clock is ticking. every month without a clear course correction entrenches the structural shift. Just look at sorghum. Before the tariffs, China was its largest buyer. Over 90% of U.S. sorghum exports once went to China. Now that market is virtually gone. Soybeans are heading the same way, as China's imports from Brazil have surged by 25% while U.S. prices collapse. These aren't minor market shifts. They represent a wholesale transformation in how the world sources its food. With each passing season, American farmers are becoming less relevant on the global stage. The most painful irony is that this was entirely avoidable. For decades, U.S. farm policy promoted overproduction, relying on foreign buyers to absorb the excess and provide price stability. Now that those buyers are walking away, the system is crumbling. Nearly half America's grain growers admit they can't break even without exports, yet Washington continues to double down on the same failed strategies: tariffs, bailouts, and empty rhetoric. This isn't just about lost revenue. It's about the collapse of an entire agricultural foundation. When trust erodes, markets don't just contract, they vanish, and no political speech or emergency check can bring them back. The question isn't whether farmers will survive this year. It's whether American agriculture will still matter globally when the dust settles. The world is moving on, with or without the United States. This crisis is no longer about tariffs or partisan posturing. It's a fight for survival, one that won't be solved with temporary relief or recycled promises. The data tells a story: collapsing exports, abandoned shipments, and unraveling supply chains. But behind the numbers are real people. Farmers watching lifetimes of labor slip away, port workers losing their jobs, and rural communities teetering on the edge of economic collapse. Washington continues to treat this like a winnable trade dispute, but that's a dangerous illusion. Trade wars don't end in surrender. They end in broken systems and restructured global markets. China isn't just scaling back U.S. imports. It's actively building alternative trade routes that exclude American agriculture entirely. Brazil, Argentina, and others aren't temporary placeholders. They're the new normal. And every day without real solutions cements that reality. The stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just an economic issue. It's about food security, rural livelihoods, and America's place in the global economy. Farmers don't need another bailout. They need open markets, consistent trade policy, and a government that treats agriculture as the strategic asset it truly is. Without that, no amount of money will stop the decline. America's farmlands are in crisis, and the world needs to see what's really happening. If this shocks you, hit that like button and share this video with anyone who cares about food security, rural communities, or the future of American agriculture. Subscribe to our channel for in-depth coverage of the stories corporate media ignores. We're committed to holding power accountable and shedding light on the real impact of the trade war. It's not just a headline. It's a turning point. Don't let Washington silence this conversation. Tap subscribe now and stay informed.